Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. Today, we are here to take a look at Hugo, the next upcoming S-rank Ice attack agent in Zenless Zone Zero. Here we have Hugo, who I believe is actually a vampire. Many of you guys corrected me in my last video on Vivian, stating that she is a banshee, not a vampire. But if Hugo's not a vampire, I will eat my cat. But hopefully he's a vampire, so I don't have to eat it, and I will probably not eat it regardless. Starting off, Hugo is actually our third limited S-rank Ice attack / offensive agent. And fortunately though, Hugo does have a very distinct playstyle and feels quite different to use in comparison to the other two. But one more thing about Hugo that I think many of you husbando appreciators out there will like about him is that now with Hugo, you will have a fully all husbando team that is actually optimal to play. And with all that being as an introduction to him, I'm gonna get myself out of the way here and we can take a look at some of his animations for you all. This video was filmed on the early access server and is not indicative of the final product. There may be some changes on release, so be sure to check the comments down below to see if there are any. So starting off, let's actually take a look at Hugo's kit. We can appreciate that he is indeed carrying a briefcase of all things, and it looks like he just kind of smacks is he smacking the enemy with like his keys, or is that a knife? Hang on. I think it's a knife. Yeah, it looks like a switchblade or something. So it's not like he's just smacking them with his keys or whatever. But there we go. We got some kicks, and then we have some funny animations. And then he has a giant scythe inside of his suitcase, which he can also blast the enemy with a couple additional like scythe shots. And honestly though, when it comes to his kit, most of this stuff is not important at all, at the very least for most of us that are planning to use him. I'm sure some of you sweatlords out there will be able to, you know, figure out some absolutely crazy stuff when it comes to him, but at the very least for most of us, it's going to be a pretty simple character. And that's another great thing about Hugo. In my opinion, in comparison to a lot of the other characters, he feels much simpler to use. What exactly is his gimmick? You'll actually notice he doesn't have a secondary resource bar. And instead, Hugo focuses on when the enemy is stunned, that is when he does most of his damage. So let's go ahead and buff up, get the stunner's buffs up, just like this. We go for this on lighter to do a lot of days. And then we will stun the enemy with Lycaon real quick. So that should be most of the buffs. And here we go. So we go into Hugo with his chain attack, which, you know, it's not really his chain attack that matters here, but if we hit the enemy with an EX special now, you will see this Totalize, which just casually deals, 2.17 million damage in this case. So on top of being pretty easy to use, in my opinion at least, he feels pretty easy to use. He is a character who you will get to enjoy lots of big damage per screenshots with his Totalize mechanic. The way that he works is that, hang on, we're actually going to need to make the enemy invincible for this. And what is going on with the Totalize mechanic here, that giant number that you see, like why is that happening and what does it do? Basically, when the enemy is stunned, so we're going to go ahead and stun the enemy real quick. Normally, you have like somewhere between 7 and 15 seconds to smack the enemy and to wail on the enemy. But in Hugo's case, he actually basically converts the stun bar into damage. And the longer that the enemy has left to be stunned, the more damage Totalize will do. And it also removes the stun from the enemy, just like this, in order to do as much damage as possible as you can with him. And you can also follow up his Totalize with a couple of those, kind of charged scythe shots that I mentioned earlier. Those aren't really like absolutely mandatory for his kit. Most of his stuff comes from the Totalize, but that's just one more thing to do. And the thing about using Hugo, and this is actually pretty funny with this entire team. So with Lighter, you can hold the left mouse button, all right? With Lycaon, you hold the left mouse button a few times, okay? A few times. And we go ahead for the stun. Look at this, we go into Hugo. So we're gonna go ahead and use his EX special. There's a Totalize, and now you just hold the left mouse button. This entire team, all 3 characters, in order to perform their combos, you literally just hold the left mouse button. So mechanically speaking, this is one of the easiest teams to use, in my opinion, from like an execution perspective. And it's also very satisfying in the sense that, you get these big damage per screenshots, as well as the fact that, in my opinion, kind of the stun meta playstyle is more straightforward. You just go for the stun and then you dish your damage. Okay, so what is going on? In order to explain why Hugo's kit works like this, we actually have to take a look at his core skill. His core skill is what makes him, play in this way, is that first of all, when he does a chain attack, he gets 12% crit rate and 25% crit damage. But more importantly, what makes Hugo Hugo is that when there are 1 to 2 stun characters in your squad, Hugo's attack increases by 300 and 900 respectively. So that's a lot of attack for just putting stun characters on your team. And when the finishing move of his EX special or his ultimate hit the enemy while they are stunned, it triggers the Totalize effect. And there's a lot of yapping here, but basically what this yapping is saying is the longer the stun duration on the enemy, the bigger the multiplier for Totalize will be. Essentially, Hugo is rewarded for using an EX special or ultimate against a stunned enemy sooner rather than later for a larger multiplier. With 10 to 12 seconds left on the enemy's stun bar, which is probably the most common scenario for Hugo on average, you'll have around a 3000% Totalize multiplier, which is absolutely fantastic. Not only that, as we saw earlier, when the Totalize is triggered, then the stun is removed from the enemy, and some of the days ends up being left on the enemy. Basically, the enemy will be left off with around 25% of their days multiplier bar, which means that you will be able to stun the enemy much more quickly, starting from 25% instead of 0. And then we have his additional ability, which pretty much just increases the amount of damage that his Totalize does, if you have at least 1 stun agent or another ice agent on your party. All right, let's start with a free-to-play, a friendlier showcase. And we're going to start off with Hugo with this build. He's got the 4-piece hormone pump because really you only switch him on when you do his chain attack in order to then output his Totalize. So he's using the Event Wenjin, the Gilded Blossom. Very free-to-play friendly build on Hugo, although the drive sets are pretty good, so do keep that in mind. Next, we have Anby with just whatever build that she started off with on the media server. She does indeed have Mindscape 6 there. And we also are going to use Pulchra, who is at Mindscape 6, and I guess she's using this set. Yeah, that's fine, whatever, who cares? Not a big deal when it comes to that. So let's go ahead and try this out. Now, I'm actually going to choose the twin marionettes here as the showcase here, because the other bosses, you can't even see the amount of damage that Totalize does, because the hit that kills the enemy, whether it's the first phase or the second phase, the damage number doesn't even pop up, which is a real shame. I really wish they would do something about that. That's kind of the whole point of using him. So anyway, we're gonna go ahead and go for the double chain on Hugo real quick. So now we switch to Anby and quickly reactivate the chain. And here we go. We're gonna go for the Totalize here with the EX special. And bam, 700k. So definitely a lot lower. Oops. Okay, I forgot that. This is definitely the most this is definitely the most annoying weekly boss. I do say. Yeah, super annoying fight, but anyway. There we go. Now we can go for the stun on the other one. And another double chain into Anby. Where'd you go? There you are. Okay. So this time we can actually use our ultimate to trigger Totalize, and hopefully we can see the number again. So here we go. There we go, 700k. Not too bad, but unfortunately didn't quite finish it off. So we are in for an extended fight here, my friends. Here we go. We just gotta dodge these things, and we have to dodge this thing that falls onto your head. And I think we're good now. So go for Pulchor's ultimate. But yeah, basically, as you can see, you just keep going for the stuns on the enemies. In this case, we don't even need to worry about... Okay, so that time we didn't see the totalized damage number because I believe it finished it off. So hopefully we can get this thing down in time. There we go. And the chain attack might actually finish it off this time. So yeah, as you can see, just go for the stuns and you'll get a few occasional nice totalized numbers. Okay, you might have felt that that last one was a bit underwhelming, which it objectively was. But this time I'm bringing his premium Hugo team, which is overall one of, I would say, his best in slot team options as of his release. And this is when he runs double stunners and actually good stunners like Lycaon, as well as Lighter, because both of these stunners will boost up ice damage by a lot. And having both of them, they just stun the enemy like crazy. Like, look at Lighter just face tanking everything and then just, applying a ton of days to everyone. And here we're going to go ahead and try to get them to actually stun at the same time, which we're very close there, and we almost managed to do it. So then I tag him with Lycaon's EX special to basically activate stun them both in the same time. And here we go, in a single EX special, bam, wipe them both out. In case you were wondering how much damage this did, well, I did another one where I failed to kill them both, and we can see there's roughly 2.4 million totalized on the one that died and 1.63 million on the one that survived. So definitely big damage numbers when you are able to, actually use some good buffers for him, aka, well, basically Lighter, Lycaon, and there are a few other options as well, which I'll mention later. Alrighty, we have reached the Deadly Assault showcases, and I have 3 runs for you guys today, starting off with overall one of my personal favorite teams for Hugo, and this is going to be Lycaon plus Lighter plus Hugo, and in this specific case everyone is at sequence 0 with upgrade 1 on their Wenjins. Hopefully their cosmetics match it, but if not, I apologize in advance. Just know that you can toggle on and off the Wenjin effects. I think Hugo might not have his. It's really hard for me to tell, though, to be completely honest. But yeah, everyone's using their signature Wenjins, although let's be real, Lycaon's doesn't really matter that much, but Lighter's is indeed very nice to have. Anyway, what I really like about this team is just how fluid it feels. There are a couple little tricks that you do need to pay attention to, and that is basically you want to build up most of the days with like Lighters, flurry of punches, but you actually want to initiate the stun with Lycaon if possible, because that way you can get the 35% bonus damage stun multiplier onto the enemy by initiating the stun with Lycaon. Anyway, you can see there just a casual 4 million totalized. Now this does have buffs that favor this team, so do keep that in mind. Typically with Deadly Assaults, you will always see that for the featured team, and well, in this case that is no exception. So yeah, performances will be a little bit overinflated in comparison to when, well, of course, if you don't have those buffs. So yeah, anyway, this team, it feels very, very fluid. You can alternate between defensive assists between Lycaon and Lighter if you're actually good at the game, but if you're not good at the game like me, well, you're probably just gonna get hit a lot. But yeah, 4.28 million totalized. This team feels really, really good, unlike well, let's just say the next team, because this one is indeed the premium Hugo team. Fortunately, you don't really need Lycaon's Lycaon, as I mentioned, so that cost is a bit, wasted here in that sense. But you can see here that I am indeed going for the double chain combo with Hugo in order to milk out a bit of extra damage. And there might be a case to be made for skipping the chain. Nah, probably not. I mean, it's just such a high multiplier that it's probably not worth skipping the double chain, so never mind. But yeah, I was thinking like maybe you could get off an additional stun you know, during the fight, but even then, right, that's a lot of chains that you are sacrificing for that. So nope, I take that back. But anyway, I don't have too much else to say about this team, but basically Lighter provides massive buffs to fire and ice damage, and Hugo happens to be an ice agent. There's only one small caveat when it comes to using Lighter with Hugo, and that is that there are currently, I believe, no enemies off the top of my head, especially not ones that matter, that are weak to both ice and fire. For the most part, you are weak to one or the other and often resist, you know, one or the other. So yeah, that is one bit of lack of synergy when it comes to Lighter and Hugo. However, fortunately, Lycaon is here to pick up the slack and output a ton of days against ice weak enemies. And bam, just another 4.18 million totalize. We're starting to see a consistent pattern here. I try my best to kill the clones, but you know, skill issues. And yeah, so in this specific run though, we did manage to squeeze out one extra stun, which is why this one ended up being my best run despite having to deal with these clones as well. So I'm just kind of going for the lighter, you know, punches in order to hurry up and beat up those clones, as well as to stun that thing as fast as possible to squeeze out that one last EX special right there. Bam! Right before the run ended, we managed to squeeze out the very last Totalize. And yeah, pretty decent score, 52,114. And unfortunately, we are now moving on to the very free team. And this is a big issue with Hugo, is that in my opinion, if you don't have Lycaon and some other premium supports, like for example Astra Yao, or even like, you know, other stunners like Qingyi, Lighter, etc., Trigger as well, then you're kind of stuck with a team like this. So if you're like a new player and you know you already spent your standard banner, you know, selector on anyone but Lycaon, and like this is like one of your better options that you have for him, oh my goodness. I mean, I just can't recommend him. I got to be completely honest. Like, it is hard to recommend him in this case because you're going to see how much damage his Totalize does here. And it is a whopping 1.5 million damage, almost 1/3 of the amount that he was doing in the premium team. And this is also with free-to-play friendly Wenjins. Hugo is on the Gilded Blossom or whatever it's called, that event Wenjin that is one of the better ones for him that boosts his EX special damage. And Soukaku has her signature, Anby has her signature. We can see though that these numbers pale in comparison. They're literally fractions of his, you know, more premium team. So in comparison to most characters, I feel like Hugo has a bit more trouble when it comes to a completely free-to-play friendly team. However, a ton of us do have Lycaon or might have selected Lycaon or something like that. So in that case, you know, Hugo is in much better shape. For those that do have Lycaon, need another Ice DPS instead of, I guess, Alan or Miyabi. And I gotta be completely honest, I tried this 3 times and I could not crack 20,000. So that probably a skill issue thing, like on my part, but we are also talking about having buffs. And if I can't even score 20,000, you know, as a content creator and stuff, I know someone will probably like 60K with that team. Okay, I know you guys are out there. But for me, you know, as representing the average Joe, or, you know, maybe slightly above average Joe, because I'm willing to retry over and over, well, hey, you know, that's the best I could do in 3 attempts. So yeah, not looking great for free-to-play friendly Hugo. However, fortunately, Hugo does have plenty of kind of more premium options. Here's just one additional example with Trigger. You can, you know, use, for example, any combination of Lycaon, Lighter, Trigger, to a lesser extent, Qingyi, and you can also use Astra Yao, even though he loses on the 600 attack. Obviously, Astra Yao provides a ton of attack to compensate. You will have a bit less days as well in comparison, for example, both Lighter and Lycaon, which provide a ton of days when paired together, because the two of them can alternate between their high days abilities, like so. But anyway, with Trigger as well, you know, she's mostly off-field. However, you will notice that the Totalizes definitely do a lot less damage. 3 million in comparison to the consistent 4 million plus or so with the previous premium team, or the first premium team. So you will definitely have a, in my opinion, at least from my personal testing, a big difference in performance when using, you know, someone besides Lighter and Trigger in this case. So yeah, but still, this team is obviously very capable. I mean, 3 million damage for each one of those is pretty good, all things considered. Right? It's a lot of damage. So yeah, it's just not quite at the same level of the previous team, and you can definitely see that. However, Trigger definitely feels great to use. In this case, Trigger is also using her signature Wenjin, so please keep that in mind. So yeah, it is a bit of a high investment team, but you know, Trigger being much more universal than Lighter is pretty nice. And yeah, so we're gonna keep going here, and we end up with some clear times that you guys will see soon enough, but I guess I'll keep on yapping a bit. But basically, Hugo is a character who, in my opinion, you really want to have his, one of his better teams, and that includes a combination of characters I mentioned earlier. And if not, if you don't have, at least one of those characters, you're going to be in for a rough time with this character. But if you have at least one of those characters, or even better yet, two of those characters, Hugo is a very competent Ice DPS character. Now, many of you are going to ask me, is he better than Ellen? Is he better than Miyabi? Unfortunately, I don't have an exact answer for that. You're going to have some content that favors him or favors Miyabi a bit more, but I do think Miyabi still feels overall better than Hugo, but that could just be my personal bias and my personal scores being, a bit better with Miyabi than with Hugo. So it's really hard to say in the end, but, at the very least, you can rest easy knowing that he is a competent DPS with a proper team. Let me know what you think about Hugo down in the comments below, and yeah, as always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.